Hello and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be painting a selection of Necrons in the Zarokhan Dynasty colour scheme. We're going to be using both classic and contrast methods and we're painting them up to battle ready. Now we've got a selection of models we're going to focus on, so we're going to be painting a Lich Guard, we're going to be painting a Canoptek Wraith and an Annihilation Barge. But the first thing we need to do is undercoat these models and we'll be using Runelord Brass for that. As you can see here with the Lich Guard that I've got here. That's going to be the first model we're going to concentrate on. And the first thing I'm going to do is start painting some Iron Hand Steel, some of those lighter areas like his shoulder pads, his face and the armour joins. So what I'm going to do is get my medium layer brush, apply a little bit to the palette, probably a little bit more than that. And with any base paints, always add a little bit of water because we don't want it too thick and goopy. Get a nice point to the brush and then we're ready to start painting. So like I said, you've got the face to do, or the skull mask, the shoulder pads, like I said, the joins in the arms or like around the arm and stuff like that, things like here around the wrists, the elbows, back of the knees. So just check the box art if you're not sure. There we are, with those silver details now picked out. What we're going to do now is move on to picking out the rest of the base coats. We're going to start with Retributor armour here for any gold details. After that we'll use Corvus Black for any black areas. Then we'll use Corax White in preparation for like the glowy effects. And also it's worth having some Runelord Brass just in case you make any mistakes, you can tidy back up those areas. So first of all, let's start with Retributor armour. So apply a little bit to the palette again as always, just a little touch of water just so it's not too thick and goopy. Now it can vary on the models if you want to, but for this particular Lich Guard, the gold details I'm going to focus on are going to be the crown, the little loincloth here, and then some of the details on the weapon. First of all, I'll start with that crown. There we are with the Retributor armour now base coated. We're going to move on to the next colour, which is Corvus Black. So this is mainly for the haft of the weapon. There's also a little cable here, and then some of the little bits there, the coils on the top of his weapon. Take your time, work your way around, and also the detail at the back of that cartouche there as well. There we are with the Corvus Black now done. We're going to finish off with Corax White. I'm going to start picking out the energy weapon. So you've got the blade here to do. You've also got the orb here, his eyes, and there's a little orb just on his loincloth as well. Now you might want to do a couple of coats of this just to get a nice even coverage. There we are with the Corax White now dry. We're going to move on to the next stage, which is to add some shades and contrast. We're going to start first with Cryptek Armour Shade Gloss. Then after that, we're going to be using Basilicane and Grey, and then we'll be using a little bit of Agrat Surf Shade. But first of all, we'll start with that Cryptek Armour Shade Gloss. So I'm just going to apply a little bit to the palette, like so. I'm using a medium shade brush here as well. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water, not too much. I don't want it too heavy and pigment heavy. So all I'm going to do is load that up, and I'm going to apply this over the silver details, the gold details, and also the Runelord Brass details. So take your time and apply that over. There we are with the Cryptek Armour Shade Gloss now dry. We're going to move on to applying Basilicane and Grey. So you're looking to coat this over any black details and also the joints in the armour as well. There we are with the Basilicane and Grey now dry. We're going to finish off by using a little bit of Agrat Surf Shade, and this is just going to go on some of the deeper recesses of the gold. Again, try not to overload your brush. If you do find it pooling, just use your brush to soak up. There we are with the Agrat Surf Shade dried in those recesses. We're now going to finish off our Lich Guard by applying Tesseract Glow to any glowy details in the model. So I'm going to continue using my medium layer brush, just apply a little bit to the palette. Again, try not to overload the brush too much, get a nice point, and then we're ready to start coating everything that we're base coated with Corax White. Take your time, and if you do find it pooling in certain areas, just use your brush to soak up any excess. And there we are with the Lich Guard now done. We're going to move on to our next model, which is the Canoptek Wraith. You can also use this guide for similar size things, such as Tomb Blades and Canoptek Spiders. So we're going to start off by applying some base coats. The first one we're going to be doing is Iron Hand Steel. This is going to be for like the light armour details. Then we'll use Corvus Black for any black details, Caliban Green for any cables, and then we'll finish off with Corax White ready for any kind of glowy effects. But first of all, let's start with the Iron Hand Steel. So again, apply a little bit to the palette, a little bit of water, just so it's not too thick and goopy. And then we'll start with these panels at the back. So just take your time, work your way around. You might want to do a couple of coats just in case some of the Runelord Brass shows through. There we are, the Iron Hand Steel now applied. We're going to move on to using Corvus Black, and this is just going to be for the gun casing. Obviously this will vary from different weapons that you choose to pick, but for this one it's just going to be on here. There we are with the gun now coated with Corvus Black. We're going to move on to painting the cables using Caliban Green. So you've got a couple just here underneath and then the rest further down. So just take your time and you might want to do a couple of layers of it. There we are, those cables picked out. What I'm going to do now is paint any glowing details with Corax White. This is to get ready for when we start applying Tesseract Glow. So you've got quite a few little details there. You've got some glowy orbs here, one on the top there, this one here, and then you have a whole range that just go down the side of the actual Wraith's body. So take your time and just pick those out. And you might, in some places, just need to do a couple of coats. There we are, with the Corax White areas now picked out. For the glowy effects, what we're going to do now is move on to applying some shades and some contrasts. We're going to start first with Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss. That's going to go over anywhere that's been base coated with Rune Lord Brass or Iron Hand Steel. After that, we'll use Basilicanum Grey for any Iron Hand Steel details and also onto the black details. Then we'll use a little bit of Agrax Earth Shade, and then we're going to put that on the spikes and the claws just to make it feel a bit more rusty. Then we'll finish off by applying Tesseract Glow to those white areas to make them nice and glowy. But first of all, let's start with Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss. I'm going to thin this down a little bit, so I'm going to add 2 little paintbrushes of Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss and a paintbrush of water just to thin it down a little. It's okay using water because you've got quite a lot of pigment in there anyway. Not going to overload my brush too much, and then we're ready to start applying that. So like I said, we're going to be doing this over the silver details and the Rune Lord Brass details. Now do be mindful here, you are probably going to get some of this on, and all the other shades as well will be applying onto those white details, so you will probably need to do some tidying up when you've done all that before you start applying the Tesseract Glow. But don't worry about that yet, just concentrate on getting all these areas covered with Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss. There we are, the Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss now dry. What we're going to do now is move on to applying Basilicanum Grey. This is going to go on the black details and a couple of little silver details here and there, such as the coils, some of the details on the back of the gun. With the Basilicanum Grey now dry, we're going to move on to using Agrax Earth Shade just for the little spike on the tail here and the 2 little claws on the top there. There we are, with the shade now dry. We're going to finish off by picking out the glowy effects using Tesseract Glow. So anything that you've painted with Corax White, just coat that with this now. And there we are, the Canoptek Wraith now done. We're going to move on to our final model, which is the Annihilation Barge. Also follow this guide if you want to paint up the Catacomb Command Barge as well as the Triarch Stalker. And also for the crew of those, just use the Lich Guard guide we did at the very start. Now the model undercoated in Rune Lord Brass, as you can see here, we're going to start applying our base coats. Now we'll start off with Iron Hand Steel for any light steel areas, such as the shoulder pads, the face and the joints of the crew, as well as any other armour panels on the vessel itself. After that, we'll be using Corvus Black for the casings of the guns, then Caliban Green for any cables and tubes, then we'll finish off with a little bit of Corax White in preparation for that nice glowy effect. But first of all, let's start off with Iron Hand Steel. Now for this, I'm going to be using my large base brush as well, because I've got some large areas to base coat, a little touch of water, like so. And then we're ready to start painting. Now a top tip when doing this is actually to have some sub-assemblies on the model. So I've actually not glued this gun on. So all I'm going to do is just pull that off like so. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky getting it out. There we are. So once that's done, I can now access the back here where you've got the spinal column and also some of the interior of these panels. So I'm going to start doing that now. So I'll start with the spinal column. There we are, those areas now picked out of Iron Hand Steel. What we're going to do now is move on to the gun casing. For this we're using Corvus Black. And also don't forget to do your twin Tesla Destructor as well. With this black you might want to do a couple of thin coats as well. There we are, the gun casing now done. What we're going to do now is move on to picking out the cables. So you just got a couple under here on the actual gun. There's others elsewhere and there's some on the twin Tesla Destructor as well. Just take your time and you might want to do a couple of coats. There we are, with those cables picked out in Caliban Green. What we're going to do now is use Corax White in preparation for any glowy effects. So any orbs or anything that looks like it should have a nice glowing effect to it. Check the box out if you're not sure. So you've got things out on the front here. You've also got the control panels to do as well. There we are, with the Corax White now applied to those glowy areas. What we're going to do now is move on to applying some shades and contrasts. We're going to start first by using Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss. I'm also going to thin this down because you've got large surface areas as well for that. That's going to go on the Rune Lord Brass details and some of the silver details. After that, we'll be using Basilicanum Grey. This is going to go on the armour joints of the crew as well as any black details. And then after that, we'll be using Tesseract Glow. I'm going to apply that on the glowy areas. At this point as well, what you might need to do is just tidy back up some of those areas with some Corax White, because as the process of applying lots of shades, you might get some of that on there. But first of all, let's start with the Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss. So what I'm going to do is apply a couple of dollops onto my palette like so, and same for water as well. It's okay to thin this down as it being a shade. I'm not going to use any Lamy Medium because that will actually remove a lot of the shininess. So I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is just load that brush up, not too much, and then I'm going to start concentrating around here. Again, your real aim is to try and get most of it into the recesses, and with it being thinned down, it'll spread out a bit nicer as well. Sometimes as well, when you are applying shades with the undercoat, for instance with this metallic undercoat Roulon Brass, it does spread away a bit. So all you need to do is just keep working in, as you can see I'm doing here, and that eventually removes any of that weird blotchiness. Take your time and just keep working around on those areas. There we are with that Cryptek Armour Shade Gloss now dry. You can see it's giving some nice weathered effects in places where it's pooled as well. So what we're going to do now is apply a little bit of basilicanum grey to the joints of the exoskeleton of these actual crew, and also to these large joint sections here as well, just add a bit more depth. Take your time, and again in some places you might want to do a second coat. And there we are with the basilicanum grey now dry. What we're going to do now is use Tesseract Glow to get that nice glowy effect on all those areas we're base coated with Corax White. So take your time. If you do find it dribbling, just use your brush to soak up any excess. Do be mindful at this point as well, or just before, to tidy any areas up with Corax White in case you've splodged with any of those contrasts and shades. And there we are with the Tesseract Glow now dry and our gun attached to the rest of the build. Our Annihilation Barge is done. So what we're going to do now is finish off this painting guide by basing our models. We'll use the Annihilation Barge for our example. So what we're going to do first is apply some Astro Granite to the base. Once that's dry, we're then going to apply some Agrax Earthshade over the top of it. But first of all, let's get our trusty texture tool. I'm going to use the large scoop side first. I'm going to start applying some of that Astro Granite to it. So all I'm going to do is get a couple of scoops like so. Now a good thing is I've not actually glued this to the actual stem. So all I'm going to do is just slightly move that off, put that to the side, and it just means I can access this a lot easier. So all I'm then do is start applying that on like so. And again, scoop back in, get some more. It can be as heavy as you want to or as thin as you want to, just slowly build up that texture. And then you want to leave that to dry for around about an hour. There we are with the Astro Granite now dry. What we're going to do now is apply Agrax Earthshade all over. Once that's done, you want to leave it to dry for around about 30 minutes and then paint the rim of the base in the colour that matches your army. And for this, we'll be using Steel Legion Drab. And there we are with the rim of the base painted. Our Necron Battle Ready video is now done. Now there's a couple of things to remember when painting these models. Firstly, when using base paints, try and be as neat as you can. Remember, the neater you are, the better the end result. And if you do make any mistakes, you can always tidy back up at a later point, like we did in this video using Corax White. Also, when using shades and contrasts, try not to overload your brush as it can quickly run out of control. If you do find that happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. And there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed painting your own battle ready Necrons, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.